I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We have some really neat and important and smart people that are going to talk to you tonight and talk with you tonight. Not the least of which your mayor, who you may or may not know at this point. So this will be fun. My name's Nick Roberts. I'm program manager with the Office for Civic Engagement. This is completely made up. We are trying this and seeing what happens from here, both tonight and later on. So we're glad you're here to talk candidly about politics and university and the city of Missoula and whatever else is on your mind, because this is really about you and not about a speech or an agenda that we have and that we want to impose on you. We hope this will just be a conversation, something that feels accessible and relevant to all of your lives. And so feel the flexibility throughout the night and feel free to help us shape the event. Before we get started momentarily, I'd like to thank a couple of organizations that helped us pull this thing together. First of all, a hand for Brad Bell, our student worker in the Office for Civic Engagement. Been running around trying to figure out what you guys want to hear and how you want to hear it. And Jessica Callis is here from the Student Social Work Association. They provided the goodies for you tonight. So. Last but not least, the ASUM representative, Ricky Gregory, is here, and she has helped. She's been in the mayor's ear on a number of issues for a while and has helped us sort of shape content and do some recruiting and publicity as well. So thanks to all these guys. And what we hope to do is first start out with something sort of funny. Brad and Jessica and one of our other students in the Office for Civic Engagement yesterday roamed around your university center and asked some pretty candid questions about local government, the university, and its relationship with the city, and maybe just some quirky things that they wanted to know, or that we wanted to know about their, I guess, their impression of our mayor here in Missoula. So we're going to show this first, about 5 minutes worth of...
Gee, I'm looking forward to this.
Yes. We're going to show this first, and then we'll introduce both your mayor and a distinguished guest of panelists who are going to have some conversation about a number of things. So we'll start with this little clip.
Dubuque, Iowa. Saturday, Boulder, Wisconsin. Monday, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Have the radio on. All right, let's try this.
The mayor of Missoula.
John Angton,
What is your political affiliation?
Democrat.
What part of town does the mayor live in?
I don't know.
Do you think the mayor cares about college students and college life?
I hope so.
Do you know the height requirement to be the mayor of Missoula?
Are you serious? Requirement?
Is it important for college students to learn about their local government, and why or why not?
I think it depends on whether or not the student's actually going to be here for very long. I mean, I guess yeah, it's important, but most students don't.
If you could have the mayor endorse just one issue in Missoula, what would it be?
I think I would like to see more involvement with the hate crime problems that we've been having.
Where would you take the mayor on a date?
I get a lot of that.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I don't date much. I don't know.
Okay, and finally, where does the mayor stand on the following highly controversial issues? Basically, your best guess. Here's your best guess.
Okay.
Soda or pop?
Soda.
Bayern or Big Sky?
Mayor.
Walk, bike, or bus?
Bike.
French fries or freedom fries?
French fries.
requirement to be the mayor of Missoula?
There's a height
Height
requirement.
requirement?
Are you serious?
I think it's great. Yeah.
Okay. Is it important for college students to learn about their local government and why or why not?
Right, I suppose it is. It's good to be involved. Why? Just is morally and ethically sound.
If you could have the mayor endorse just one issue in Missoula, what would it be?
Camp a code contract.
Where would you take the mayor on a date?
Carousel ride.
And then finally,
Ride the same horse.
where does the mayor stand on the following highly controversial issue? And you can just give us your best guess. Soda or pop?
Well, it's on campus.
Bayern or Big Sky? Walk, bike, or bus?
Like,
French fries or freedom fries? Boxers or briefs?
briefs.
Awesome, thank you guys. Thank you. Who's the mayor of Missoula?
I believe. I don't know. I think he's the independent. I don't know.
What is your political affiliation?
I'm a Republican.
What part of town does the mayor live in?
He probably. I have no idea.
Do you think the mayor cares about college students and college life?
I think he would try to show me. I would hope so.
Do you know the height requirement to be mayor in Montana?
I didn't know there was.
Is it important for college students to learn about their local government and why or why not?
I think it would be important because the local government does influence college students' lives and the laws they make.
If you could have the mayor endorse just one issue in Missoula, what would it be?
To endorse one issue in Missoula, it would probably be more parking on U-Bank.
Where would you take the mayor on a date?
Where I would take him on a date. I would maybe go on hunts, talk business, whatever. Maybe I'd take him to Thai restaurant.
And then finally, where does the mayor stand on the following highly controversial issue? Just give us your best guess, okay? Soda or pop?
I think he would, I have no idea. Maybe soda.
Bayern or Big Sky?
Big Sky.
Walk, bike, or bus?
I think he'd go for the bus.
French fries or freedom fries?
French fries are freedom fries. Maybe freedom fries. French fries.
Boxers or briefs?
Greece.
Awesome, thank you.
Where's the webcam? Okay.
All right, maybe if we're lucky, the mayor will approve the boxes of brief debate this evening, but or maybe we're unlucky. I'm not sure. So, nonetheless, this is what some of your students think. Here in a little while, you're going to get a chance to disprove them, or concur, or whatever. So, take that off. Without further ado, we're going to have the mayor of Missoula come talk for a brief moment before we have a panel to join him. Big round of applause for Mayor Engen.
Thanks very much, Nick. So when you say brief moment, there's no pun intended? In my case, it is, it's briefs, but on anyone else, they'd probably be boxers, frankly. It really becomes a volume issue. Nope. It's not every meeting that I attend that begins with a laugh, so that was a very pleasant way to start this. And I appreciate the effort that folks made to capture the moment. I'm happy to be here, and I'm also happy to see the turnout. This is unusual. I haven't seen a crowd this big since I was on the campaign trail of folks who were interested in hearing anything I had to say. So thank you for coming tonight. I'm far more interested in hearing what you have to say and what you're interested in, and ways that the city can help engage you. I tell folks pretty regularly that I serve about 60,000 souls, and their interests are quite different. I know I have at least one billionaire on my list of constituents, and I have folks who sleep in their cars. And I have infants and everyone in between. And I consider that an honor, a privilege, a remarkable responsibility. But I'm not in this alone. We are all in this together in one way or another, sometimes for better or worse. And the more we can engage and talk to each other civilly, intelligently, and creatively, I think the better off we all are. So I look forward to spending some time with you this evening and drinking coffee. I prefer Bayern. What were the other questions?
French fries or freedom fries?
I'm a French fry guy. The saltier, the better. Bike, walk, bus, car. Not that I don't have good intentions. What else did we have?
Soda or pop?
I used to be a pop guy, but now I'm a soda guy, and I can change with the times. Beautiful thing. I'd just like to note at the back of the room is my former council colleague, Ed Childers, now the council president, and another fine public servant with us this evening, ladies and gentlemen, representing the city of Missoula.
So I think now we'll have our panel join Mayor, and you can get a seat there. And real briefly, they're going to tell you about why they're here and who they are, but as they're filing in, to the mayor's right, current student and staff employee here on campus, Michael Parrish.
Hi.
Current non-student university faculty member, Lynn McGregor. And former student, current staff member for the Missoula AIDS Council, Chris Peterson. They're going to tell you who they are and what they think about this place and about this relationship that we all find ourselves in every day as students and university community members, about how the university and the city coexist and sometimes not, maybe?
You heard me? Go for it.
Wow, I don't know what to say yet. I think the relationship between the university and Missoula is usually a good one. I mean, I think that the community at large, believes that the university should coexist and everything. So, so am I supposed to just introduce myself now, or what's the program, or should I get going?
Boxers or briefs, Chris?
Is nothing on the list? No, I'm kidding. So, no, but my name is Christopher Peterson. I was on campus for 5 years. I, in 2001, was elected student body president and served on ASUM for a year and was a senator before that. So 2001 and 2002 was an interesting year for student and community relations, particularly because of the occupancy standard that the city tried to pass, which limited the number of people who could live in one household, regardless of the size of the house. And so I think that was a time where the students really wanted to come together with the community and come up with a solution that was less drastic than that. And ultimately it didn't pass, but I think students came up with a good plan on how to work with the community better.
I'm Lynn McGregor, and I'm like a lot of folks who come to Missoula. I came here because of the university in September, so I'm very much a newcomer to the city. And I'm here a little bit more maybe in a professional capacity. I'm a sociologist and I specialize in studying communities. And if there's one thing that we know about communities is that what makes a community is the meaning that people attribute to a community. But the tricky thing about that is that one community means a lot of different things to very many different people. And so while it may mean a variety of things to students, lifelong residents may have some different ideas. And so one of the things that I think about an awful lot is the way that people who have different priorities when it comes to thinking about what would make a community a great place to live, is how they can come together and think about working out their priorities in a way that makes it possible for everybody to share the same space.
I'm Michael Parrish. I'm a senior studying cultural anthropology. And I've been in Missoula for most of my life. I went to Paxton Elementary School and Washington Middle School and Hellgate High School, and now I go to the University of Montana. And my grandfather was dean of the business school here for a long time, so I feel like Missoula has been in my blood for my whole life, and the university really has too. And it's been interesting to watch that relationship change as my vantage point in the community changes. I can remember being brought to the university for field trips when I was a fourth grader, and having that sort of relationship to the university where it was like this fun playground place we got to come to, and then in high school having the duke it out with the university neighborhood folks, because the bad high school students on one end and the bad college students on the other, and my grandparents lived in that neighborhood, and so and now to see it as a student and as a staff person, and in my capacity as a staff person, I run the Multicultural Alliance over in the UC, and so thinking about these sort of broader community issues of inclusion, of dealing with racism, dealing with violence, dealing with, all the sorts of major community issues that come about. So I'm really excited to get to talk with you tonight about that, and with you, and so thanks.
They're looking at me. This is for you guys. So that's a little bit about who they are and the perspective they're coming from. But what nerves has any of this touched in you? What celebrations might you want to communicate about your university community and your relationship with your city? What questions do you have for maybe the most powerful local government leader? That's sort of made up, I don't know. But he's sitting here and he's a prominent figure, and I don't know, do you feel like this guy's important to you? Do you feel like your council's important to you? You feel like blah, blah, blah. I'm just throwing out ideas, but this is about what your interests are and how you sort of find yourself in the dynamics of the relationship of a big university and a fairly small town, and how your life is enriched or not so much.
Can I ask a question of everyone, real quick? How many of you all are registered to vote in the city of Missoula? Can you just raise your hand? All right, so maybe half, a little more than that.
How many voted? Excellent. I won't ask the next obvious question. All right, well, it's been great. Thanks very much. Maybe I'll try to get the ball rolling a little bit. One of the things there are three things that I've talked about pretty relentlessly while I was running for the office I now hold. And those three things were, I think, a need for continuing our tradition of acquiring and providing open space for folks in Missoula, both for this generation and generations to come. I talk a lot about providing housing choices and opportunity for folks to find a place to live and to get some equity in their community. And I talked a lot about rules and regulations. One of the things that seems to have had significant appeal to the student groups with whom I spoke was open space. Your opportunity to take advantage of the remarkable recreational amenities that our valley offers. And I'm wondering how many open space users there are in this room, and what do you think we ought to do next? Anybody? Vinny?
Can you define open space user?
You're thinking about open containers, probably. Vinny. When's the last time you took a hike on Sentinel or Jumbo? When's the last time you used our riverfront trail system? Did you know that those are parts of our open space program? And that's a city initiative. Okay. How about you? Anyone?
I use the open spaces.
I do all the time.
Would you, if I asked you for more money to buy more, would you offer it?
Yeah, I don't
If I
know
could
if I
afford to buy a house, I would pay more in property.
If you could afford to buy a house, pay more property taxes. How many folks in the room are interested in living in Missoula when you finish your education here? Okay. How many of you want to live in a house? How many of you think you can afford one? Go ahead.
I've got a question for you. I'm concerned about the inclusionary zoning issue that is being talked about in the city and county level. Can you just briefly, if possible, describe what that is and how that benefits students, and what that interconnection is between the university and students and low-income housing?
Sure. Inclusionary zoning can take a lot of forms, but the one that I understand is being talked about most, and I haven't spent any time with drafts of the growth policy or engaged in much of the activity surrounding that. There's lots of public conversation that's about to ensue before any decisions are made. But in this particular instance, inclusionary zoning would provide for a subdivider, a developer in most cases, to include as part of his or her subdivision, as part of his or her development, a percentage, a set aside of housing that's affordable, quote unquote. We don't know what that number is. And generally that housing stock would have to be affordable in perpetuity. That is, there might be a rate of inflation that comes with it, but if that house were to be resold, it would still need to be affordable somehow. And that can be done through a number of legal means, but in effect, that's one of the most direct ways that some communities have gotten to providing real housing affordability. We've tried to engage in affordable housing projects as a city through our rules and regulations in fits and starts with I think limited success, most folks would suggest. I think this is another tack that would probably require the development community to become engaged a little more in that affordability. That affordability, I think, ends up being subsidized somehow within a development, which is interesting. In the end, somebody's paying for something. So this becomes, in many ways, a question of who and when.
Can you talk about how that affects students, why students care about that issue?
Well, I think I have to use myself as an example. I worked full time while I was going to journalism school here. I worked at the newspaper, ended up getting a professional job at the newspaper, working as an editor, and I made a pretty decent middle-class wage for someone who was 28 years old or so at that time. Was able to buy a house that cost $97,000 at that time. It was brand spanking new. It was every penny my wife and I could find, and it was a stretch at that, and pretty frightening. I reckon there are folks in this room who, if they heard they could get a 3-bedroom house in the Rattlesnake Valley for $97,000 today, you know, it wouldn't be pretty, something of a stampede. So if you're starting out and you want a shot at equity, it's pretty tough to find, because that opportunity is a lot more rare in our community today. And when I talk about a middle class, you know, our equity in that home, excuse me, has allowed us to get loans from banks when we needed them to stay in business during tough times. It allowed us to pay employees in tough times. It allowed us to purchase other businesses and grow our business, and employ more folks. That equity has allowed us to be comfortable enough to make kind of good choices about how we engage in our community. We've been able to give back, both in time and to a lesser degree in dollars. We've been able to happily support our schools even though we don't have children. And we've had a place for the dog to run, and that's important as well. But that equity piece is important. I think that's important to you. And the longer in the tooth you get, the more that equity seems to matter. It's about comfort and security and I think opportunity. I'm 41 years old and I cannot believe it. Because yesterday I was sitting where you are, except this was a practice field. You know, I mean, but believe me, it goes fast.
Question for all four of you guys. Just basically, I mean, why is it important? Why should college students, you know, some of them come from out of state and don't plan on staying? I mean, it's important for them to get involved in local city government, but why?
Oh, can I take a stab? Well, so from a really general, not necessarily specific to Missoula point of view, this is for college students most of the time, especially if you're talking about a traditional college student who comes here from high school. They're coming to college and having their first shot, really, at being neighbors on their own for the first time and being citizens on their own for the first time. And I think this is college. I mean, it's sort of we think of it as an academic training ground, but I think we also don't always, we were talking about this the other day, that we tend not to think of college as somehow part of the real world. But this is the real world, or you're still participating in the real world. And I think the more that you can be engaged in the community while you're in college and really cut your teeth on civic engagement as a college student, the more likely you are to stay engaged throughout your adult life. And that's not only good for you guys, but it's good for the communities wherever you'll end up living.
To that, you know, our campus, just on a practical level, does not have enough housing for all of the students who come here, so at some point we all have to leave campus. And whether it's just to walk 4 blocks to our apartment at the end of the day or whatever, or go grocery shopping or whatever that is, we have regular interaction with the whole community, and that can either be sort of a standoffish experience, or it can be a real community experience. And I think a lot of our students do experience this as not just a time to be on campus, even if that's their primary purpose to be in Missoula, but to really be in the community. And this is a really engaged campus in terms of civic engagement, involvement in politics, involvement in volunteerism, all those sorts of things. We are, you know, recognized as an engaged campus that leaves campus, you know, that we work with our community. And so I think there are so few people who come here who don't experience Missoula as their community, at least for a short period of time.
I think another thing too is that, in a sense, you know, as students, we have an obligation to protect and to increase participation, and to look for policies and legislation that will benefit students in the future. And so, if something negative comes along and you know, the students get involved and we're to fight that, I think the students that come after are left in a better position. There's a lot of things that affect students that has to do with city government. Housing is just one, but transportation, bond issues, our open space, public works, so I think it's important to have some stake in it. I remember when we were working on the occupancy standard, and a lot of people on the proponents of the occupancy standard kept on saying, yes, well, you're going to move away someday. You may be against this, but in a couple years you'll be gone and you won't have a stake in the community. And as we see, some people raise their hands saying they'd like to stay in Missoula, and here I am still in Missoula, and I care a great deal about what goes on in Missoula. And if that occupancy standard would have passed, it would have decreased the housing stock in Missoula. Low-income people would have been affected. Students would have been affected. And really what would happen is students would be, basically sent out to the outer rings of Missoula, and transportation would be even more chaotic than it already is in Missoula. So that was an issue that we took on, and students really got behind. And and if we hadn't, it might be an ordinance today, and we would have to live 3 miles from campus instead of the couple blocks that we might live right now. So,
I think, excuse me, the student population, quote unquote, is not unlike any other population in the city. You become engaged in municipal affairs when municipal affairs have something to do with your life. Typically, if we're going to do something that's going to change the way you live, we're probably going to see you. And to greater or lesser degrees, some of those things may not be as obvious. Christopher kind of touched on the notion of a transient population. We have a transient population through all sorts of sectors as well. It's not just the student population that kind of moves in and out of our community. I'm afraid to speculate as to this statistic that's buried somewhere in my head. But there's a fairly remarkable percentage of folks who live in Missoula for 2 years or less, and they're not all students. Now some of the student population, I grew up here, so part of my life I was a student, but I've always been a Missoulian, so it's part of the mix.
Kind of going off the occupancy standards, there's always been this kind of friction between the community and students. A lot of community members don't understand why students should have a say in community issues in the city council, and vice versa for that matter. How do you propose that we mend those fences and move towards this more cohesive community?
I think one of the things to realize, on one hand, I think it's very easy to think of the students as sort of a cohesive group with maybe interests that are entirely their own, and to some extent that may be true, but I also think that there are a lot of ways that student interests overlap with the interests of a lot of other groups in town, and I think issues like affordable housing and transportation are great examples of that. And so I think the key or a great thing for students to do would be, and also for members of the wider community to be doing, would be looking for places where there are obvious shared concerns. That would be a really easy way to build some bridges.
And I think they're there. I mean, when we talk about the occupancy stuff for housing issues, I rent a little house over in the Slant Street neighborhood with a roommate and my boyfriend, and we don't want to see our neighborhood trashed either. Like, we want other renters in the neighborhood to treat their properties well also. And it's hard to make those connections, though, with our neighbors who have been there for a long time, who own their houses, when they see us lumped together in that category, even though we take a lot of care, to make sure we're doing well by our neighborhood. That it's like, why don't you all get out of the neighborhood sort of attitude, when I think there's actually a lot of common ground there. Like, we want our neighborhood to be safe, we want it to be, we want it to look good, we want to know our neighbors, and we can't really have that conversation because our neighbors find out we're students, and it's like, oh, well, get out of the neighborhood, And so, but we really want that sort of feel of being in a neighborhood. Otherwise, we would go out to Reserve Street and rent one of those cheap apartments, and,
Well, like what Lynn said, I mean, we're all learning here, and I think it's a process, and we're learning not only to be, to be educated in the field that we're working towards, or learning to be a neighbor, or learning a lot of different issues and how to be kind of self-sufficient. And so, when that point kept coming up about, students don't take care of their yards, it's a mess, and, we asked a lot. We said, well, have you ever been over there? Have you ever talked to the person one-on-one, And, it's kind of intimidating. I mean, students might be there for 1 year, you don't really know them. There's maybe 5 students living in one place, but, a lot of times the people said, well, no, we don't want to talk to him, it won't do any good anyway. And so I think just trying to increase communication, and I know that ASUM has really worked hard to try to be a good neighbor and to facilitate that communication with, the ice cream social. I think that's a way, to try to get people around the issue and to talk openly about things, whether it's, raking your leaves or shoveling your sidewalk, or, I don't know, planting flowers. It all kind of comes together, and I think communication really is at the heart of it all.
In my experience, no one's cornered the market on bad behavior. It can occur in all strata, and I've had a number of examples of that. So I think it's important that we kind of talk about behavior, and we talk about the things that collectively trouble us, and we try to address behavior issues if we can, and we try to do that through ordinance, and we try to make sure that we can enforce the laws we pass. I don't sense, Ricky, a huge chasm between town and gown, as they say. Maybe I'm being a little bit of a Pollyanna about this, but I actually sense the opposite. I think we're lucky to live in a community where students are really well integrated in the community, whether it's where they live or where they work. And I feel pretty lucky to run across students almost every day in a variety of capacities, often serving me coffee, oddly enough. I ran out of steam. What was the question? Yeah. I think when we start creating broad categories and then create tensions between those broad categories, we start to get in trouble. My experience as a city council person and as mayor is that whenever someone stands before me and tells me I speak for, they don't. Groups with very specific sets of interests don't often agree. So I think we need to measure all of that, and to the degree possible, regard folks as individuals, and remember that we are, generally speaking, engaged in activities that benefit us. We as human beings are often in the business of self-interest. My job, the job of city council folks, the job of people who are civically engaged, is to balance those short or long-term private interests with the long-term public good. That leaves some folks dissatisfied sometimes. That's part of the program. But I think the less we say student equals 48 people living in the crappy rental next door, drinking beer with 18 dogs, or somebody who lives in a university neighborhood, crotchety, hates students, hates me, rich, whatever. That doesn't do any of us any good. It's when we can talk about the things that we can agree on and the things that we can fix. I think that's when we're better off.
And that's really true. I mean, what we found in working on the occupancy standard is there was a lot of people in the community that did really want to talk to us and did want to engage in a conversation about the issue. And you know, the majority of the university neighborhood council, you know, was against the occupancy standard, but wanted to come up with a solution that would benefit everyone. You know, so and generally, I think in Missoula, students are you know, accepted wholeheartedly, really, and the relationship on, you know, a general level is excellent, I think.
Ian? This is for Mr. Mayor. More than 50% of the residents of Missoula, as I understand it, are renters, which includes students and non-students. And we've had some almost burning up of folks in the town in the last few years. And recently there was an article in the paper about some fellow who was remodeling and found this terrible mold, and they got sick. And so my question is there any movement towards health and safety inspections for renters in this town, which is more than 50% of our population?
And Councilman Childers and I have actually had a conversation fairly recently about that, and we're trying to figure out a way to. We took a pass at this once. It was actually before my time on council, but we took a pass at this once in a way that didn't work out. It was a landlord licensing. And
the licensing, yeah.
Yeah, and you're certainly familiar with that, but I'll sort of speak to the rest of the group. And that was an effort simply to begin a process of regulating rental properties as if they were businesses. And the city of Missoula began a rental licensing program. The reason we had the licensing fee was in an effort to create an inspection process for exactly what Mr. Lang describes, trying to figure out a way to ensure health and safety of folks who are occupying these rental properties. And I don't know the ins and outs of the legal activities that ensued. I know the outcome was the city ended up paying $100,000 Ed, as I recall.
Oh, you know, gave a bunch of money back.
Right.
That was the hard part.
In effect, we gave a lot of money back based on the fact that we were sued and the courts found fault with what we did. That doesn't mean that in other communities there aren't systems in place where we can engage in that kind of inspection. And I think it's appropriate to do that. I think we need to find the way to do that. There's a friend of mine, an attorney, has rental property in Indiana, and he signs on for an annual inspection that's a function of the community in which he owns property. And if his rental property doesn't pass inspection, doesn't pass muster, it can't be occupied. The key for us is to have a revenue stream, as we like to say. We need money in order to enforce such an ordinance. So it has to be tied to some revenue somehow, and that's been our struggle.
If I can pick up on that, if I remember, what happened was the money went into a canon and went into the general fund, and so the courts then said, well, you're licensing, but the money is not going for inspection or anything else. Now, have you considered doing something like this? I'm a landlord, and I really am concerned about the health and safety of folks that live in these rat holes without egress windows, blah, blah, blah. Have you thought about a voluntary system whereby people would volunteer to have their places inspected, and then they would have a certificate, and they could advertise as having a safe and healthy place? The onus then would go on those who have the slums, either come around or maybe people wouldn't rent from them. I mean, in other words, start with a voluntary system which could then maybe evolve into a inspection for everybody.
Haven't thought about it, but I like it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alex? I'm sorry, I'm so used to doing this. Please, I don't want to run this.
I live in that good neighborhood between the bad high school students and college students. And I like both the high school students and college students. I think it's true that there are two fraternities that have closed down recently. The one on Helen and the one on Eddie or maybe Eddie. And actually that is Housing Resource, which is close to the university. And I'd like to know if anybody's thought about that, and if so, how could we protect that resource and not lose that housing to private housing, which has put more strain on the market?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great idea. And, when I was working with ASUM, we created a committee to explore alternative living situations for students. And that's where the ASUM agency came from, the Off-Campus Renter Center. You may have heard of it. One thing that we really wanted to do, and we spoke to, it kind of came out of the occupancy standard, but we really wanted to look into creating cooperative student housing for students, housing that would be owned by the associated students or the students in general, and it would be rented out so that it'd be affordable, and even on a scale eventually to get to having a food distribution system where you buy all your food together and everything is at a much more reasonable price. And I think those houses would be perfect for something like that. I think Missoula needs more affordable housing, and we actually went to California on a tour of cooperative student housing at both Davis and Berkeley, and what we found there was amazing. And we were really hoping to to start to kind of sow the seeds to create that. And I think it would be possible with those houses. It's one idea anyway.
And there's an Office for Greek Life that's sort of part of the programming office that I work in. And I know that they're really concerned about being able to keep Greek life alive and keep those houses together, especially because they provide not only a living situation, but the Greek program is a great leadership program, or has the potential to be a great leadership program, and that those houses have the potential to be full of really good neighbors. And so I know they're working really hard to keep their houses and their charters and all of that. So.
One problem I know all of Montana is facing in general is after student life. So when students leave, what is Missoula trying to do as a community to keep their postgraduates here? It's a growing community, it's a rapidly growing community in Montana. How are they grappling with that, trying to give high-paying, well-paying jobs? Because, they have students here working in the community, and then they do just go. How are they trying to keep them? Is there anything, do you guys have any insight into, as a growing community, how they're trying to get people to come and stay? Because we do have a great resource for the university.
Yeah. From my perspective, recruiting folks to live here is not difficult, but the job recruitment piece is difficult. The decent wage piece has been a struggle for us, and we chip away at it. And in many cases, government isn't terrific at that part of what we do. I was at the annual meeting of the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation 2 days ago. And the keynote speaker there was the chairman of Chinook Wireless, which is a cellular phone and data company. And in that venue, that was one of the places where, this is a person whose business is employing, I want to say roughly, will end up employing roughly 140 within the next few years. Solid jobs, benefits, chance for advancement, opportunity. And I stood up and asked, are there impediments for you doing business in the city of Missoula or in the state of Montana? And the answer I got from him in this particular instance was, there aren't, and thanks for asking. He had lots of support. We probably have some regulatory things that we could do better for all of our citizens, business or no. We need to continue to work on those. I think the city's best economic development driver is making sure that we do all the things that cities do well. We ought to fix potholes, and we ought to clean sewage, and we ought to make sure that it's safe downtown and on Reserve Street and anywhere else in our jurisdiction. We need to ensure that folks have fire protection and medical attention, that we do the things for health and safety that we can, that we create parks and recreation amenities that work. We take care of the fabric of community as best we can so that others can come here and live and work and have a great place to do business. And DirecTV is one of those examples. And whether it's a shining example is yet to be seen. But this is a company that will employ roughly 800 folks. And those jobs typically come with a fairly decent wage. They come with benefits, health benefits, which are especially important. They come with tuition help, vacation, retirement, that kind of good stuff. DirecTV had some choices about where they did business, and I think we competed pretty much dollar for dollar with other locations. But in the end, you can do business in Missoula, Montana, where you can do it, no offense if you're from Texas, but somewhere in Texas. And I think the choice was made here because we have a solid workforce of folks who want to live here and play here and raise their families here. So those are some of the things that we do well. In addition, I think we support the smart folks who are doing economic development. So Rosalie Cates and her crew at that's a relative of Vinny's. I keep forgetting about that. These are folks who do economic development in our community, the folks at MAEDC, who I think generally know what they're doing and are trying to follow the right path. Economic development is a tough critter. The city of Butte has had lots of heartbreak that comes with economic development. It's one of those areas where if you put out too much bait, sometimes you lose the hook in the pole. So it's tough. But you're absolutely right. If you want to be able to afford a house, you got to be able to make enough money to afford a house. And, yeah.
This is one of those areas where I think probably for many people while they're in school, they think, well, geez, I'd like to stay in Missoula, but there's really nothing I could do to make that possible. You know, the city is what it is. There aren't going to be any jobs. I'm just going to plan on leaving. If you're serious about staying here, then this would be your prime opportunity right now to get involved with the people who are working on economic development and start to learn about what it's going to take to make it possible for you to stay here. You don't have to wait till you graduate to do that.
Do you have suggestions, you or Mayor Egan, about how students can get involved in helping to support economic development or smart economic development in this area?
Gee, Vinny, don't you have a softball you can toss me?
You can define open space using it.
Well, so one of the things that we've had some success with in our community is we tend to inspire entrepreneurs for a number of reasons. Micro businesses. So if you're employing 2 or 3 people, you know, I hate to go back to a beer example too often, but a colleague of mine years ago at the Missoulian, she and her husband started Kettle House Brewing. This is any number of years ago, and that came from a dream, and you know that's two folks who make a living, who employ other folks, who purchase goods and services from other folks in the community. So when you're talking to elected officials or electing officials, pay some attention to how interested they are in helping to ensure that some of that opportunity is available. I supported, for example, as a council person, a St. Patrick Hospital Safeway project in conjunction with the city, because I believe St. Patrick Hospital's future is pretty vital to downtown. And I think Safeway is a pretty good player downtown as well. But medical jobs, typically in our community, are the kind of jobs that let you buy a house and make some of those choices. So kind of pay attention to, who you're electing. How's that?
I might have some more general kinds of advice on that.
Vinny just saw me shuck and jive.
Maybe not for a politician.
I mean, I think the first thing you can do, if you're serious about staying here, I think the first thing that you need to do is know the community that you're hoping to stay in, and read the paper every day, read more than one paper every day, and start, identify something about the city that interests you, whether it's the economic development stuff, whether it's open spaces, and start to get involved in that. It's really easy. Just show up to meetings. People are always happy when new faces show up to meetings because there's always work to do. If you're interested in the economic development side, I think you could march over to the Chamber of Commerce and volunteer some time over there, or call up the economic development folks, and they'd be happy to put you to work. I think there's lots of ways that you can educate. First of all, educate yourself about the issues in this community, and then get involved.
Let me jump in real quick and just let everybody know. We're at 7 o'clock, and we are not bound to 7 o'clock. We have about 30 more minutes of time, maybe before, as the mayor put it earlier, he ran out of steam, or maybe his steam's getting picked back up. I don't know, but we have about 30 minutes left, so continue on, and those that have to go, just go as you need, and grab food and beverage on the way.
John, I might also encourage you, there's an economic development committee of the council that has not really been active in the last few years, but I'm sure they welcome students and anybody that has ideas.
Absolutely.
I think maybe from a student perspective, and as about to graduate senior, it's hard to think about, I have been really involved in this community both as a high school and as a college student, and I really hope to be able to be here in the long term someday, but my partner can't get a job here, and he's been looking, and there's not that kind of work that he does here, and so we're gonna have to leave, and in the process of figuring out where we're moving, it's like, so we're gonna move to rural Illinois. It's no Missoula, but in researching that, it's like the university he's gonna go to for grad school has made a real effort to find me a job, to make sure we have a place to live. We're gonna be able, as graduate students, to be able to afford to buy a house there, and all these things that, as much as we love Missoula, would never.
I think also there's a trend in the whole country to outsource our jobs. So I think good paying jobs in this country are dwindling, whether you're in Missoula or whether you're on the East or West Coast. And I think it's a terrible thing to see happen when GM is flailing because they've laid off so many workers, partly, and those good-paying jobs are no longer there. So people can't even afford the trucks and cars that GM even makes. So I think overall the national policy is we're headed in the wrong direction to with CAFTA and NAFTA and all this free trade stuff. Now we have this Dubai ports thing. I mean, I don't mean to get overly political on a national level, but I think that that unfortunately the middle class is under attack right now, and so I think wherever you live, I think it's becoming harder and harder. So.
I heard Derek Jensen talk a couple years ago. He's the author of a book called The Culture of Make-Believe, which is about the United States. And he asked a very interesting question. Who said economic growth is good, or economic development, for that matter, because I think the two terms are really interchangeable. dovetailing into what you said about the disappearance of jobs, which are disappearing because we really are not in control of the economy. Corporations are, and they can really care less about American workers if they can make a dime somewhere else more quickly. So I think we need to look at the net effect of economic growth and economic development. I think that what we see when we look at those things is that economic growth and development is really accompanied by some pretty destructive processes, environmental, societal, and also in terms of overall public health. Where you do not have economic development, including no agriculture, you simply have a landscape that, if called upon, can sustain you. Jobs, income taxes, and everything aside. So I'm with you, but I think we have to rethink things in an entirely new and revolutionary way. Maybe it is back to the future.
How many of you all are Montana natives? And then out-of-staters? Well, I guess. Anyone who's from Missoula, the Missoula area? Anyone?
A few will confess.
Yeah.
I'll ask a question. This was something in planning our panel and some of the content that we had hoped to touch on this evening. I thought this was really interesting. Our panelists the other day were sort of posing the question. I think this is more geared towards students, especially for those that were not from Missoula and were coming here. What was your expectation of college life and your quality of life that you expected to get here? What was touted to you by your admissions representatives and by any of those who sort of enticed you to come here? And what has it turned out to be? I think is an interesting question. What challenges have you faced that maybe were unexpected? What sort of celebrations have you found that were maybe unexpected as well? Or any of that stuff, I think that might be valuable for this room to hear.
We've touched on a lot of the bad things that a lot of us have brought experience. But one of the great things that Missoula's had, out to lunch downtown, the farmer's market, the thriving downtown. I'm originally from Billings, and our downtown is sadly lacking.
Even with Sky Point.
It has gone down significantly from the time that I remember, can start remembering going down there, 4th, 5th grade, until right before I left, has even in the last 10 years significantly declined. But Missoula's not like that. It's very thriving. And it's wonderful to come to a town that has a historic district. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's a high quality of life. I mean, especially in the summer, it doesn't get dark till 9:30, so you get done with work maybe 4 or 5, and 10 minutes, and you're in a beautiful place where you can take the dogs for a walk, or swim, or whatever. So, I think employers would be, business would find great workers, educated workers, as well as a high quality of life, and people who are happy to be, in Missoula. And in fact, I can't remember what magazine it was, but Missoula made the top 10 of, I don't know if it was Inc., some small business magazine, rated Missoula in the top 10 for doing business here. Unfortunately, they cited the low income needed for people to survive in Missoula, which I thought was pretty poor. It's the same as saying go to Mexico or China. Go to Missoula because $8 an hour is great for them. So, and I think you're gonna it's gonna be tough. For having DirecTV here. It's great. We've got more jobs, but $8 an hour, you're not going to buy a house in Missoula on that. Maybe in East Missoula, maybe in Frenchtown. I don't know if even that. It's really tough. So I think it's great that we're getting some recognition because of maybe the environmental landscape and how nice it is to live here. But I also think in some ways it feels like we're being taken advantage of too. So I don't know.
I think part of what's great about this community too is that even when it's sort of misplaced, there is a sense of social justice here and what it means to have community. and that there is a pretty good segment of the community talking about things like domestic violence and racism and sexism and poverty, and that there are ongoing long-term dialogues about those issues here. And I think that's a really great piece of Missoula.
We live in a terrific place, and I'm happy to have been able to live here all my life. And in my job, sometimes I'll get a little bit bogged down in problem after problem after problem, or really hard questions about economic development. But the flip side of that is, I would argue that there's a pretty good portion of Missoulians who wake up most mornings, take a deep breath, and say, I'm pretty happy to be living in Missoula, Montana.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the summer.
Yeah.
The winter is it's a little harder.
These last 2 weeks of March, I don't know though.
Yeah. December 21st, when the daylight spans from about 1 until 2 in the afternoon. Not so much. Yeah. Exactly. With that happy note.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We're reachable at City Hall, by the way, via our website. If anyone wants to write it down, it's really simple. www.ci.missoula.mt.us. We're actually going to try to work on that, make it a little simpler. That's our website, and you're welcome. There are lots of ways to contact us. My email address is mayor@ci.missoula.mt.us. So this is a community where lots of folks have tremendous sense of ownership. So and your elected officials and I think city staff members are remarkably accessible, and we're here to help.
And it definitely goes without saying, Missoula wouldn't be the same without campus. I don't think it would be nearly the place. And I think also students just on a one-on-one kind of level contribute a lot to the community, whether it's volunteering with local organizations or campaigning for whomever you choose to campaign for, and getting involved. I think the students provide a lot to the community that we wouldn't otherwise have. So.
I have a couple of, are we closing, sort of, maybe? A couple of quick comments. First, as we said in the beginning, this was sort of made up, but I think it was really good, and I wonder what you folks would like to see next if we try to do round 2, whatever that might mean. So what I'm going to do is write an email address of mine up here. Again, I'm in the Office for Civic Engagement here on UM's campus, and you can email us your ideas on maybe any interests or suggestions on what we can do for round 2, or any thoughts or evaluation of this program, since sort of an afterthought, we didn't have evaluations for you to handwrite. So maybe you'll email us. And then I guess mostly we'd like to thank these guys for coming and talking with you tonight. Let's give them a round of applause.